Welcome to another edition of Chopper Chat. I'm looking forward to today's one. Joined today by Aircrew Officer Max Cooley and Critical Care Paramedic Marcel Treason. Hello.
Hiya.
Hi Pippa,
It's a slightly more enjoyable environment, to be honest, from the last one when we were we were together.
You look a lot more relaxed than the last time
I am
saw
a
you.
lot more relaxed. We were doing wets and decks training, is that right?
That's correct.
I'm going to get you two to explain what that is and who's involved and why it happens.
Sure. So we have a requirement to remain competent and current in any of the tasks that we do. And this particular one, as you quite rightly said, is wets and decks. So two components, the wet part being rescuing people out of the water, and then the deck part rescuing people from the vessel of a ship or a boat. Yeah.
And what are your roles in that?
So I'm an aircrew officer, so my primary role in that is a winch operator. So I'm the person that operates the winch that Marcel puts a lot of trust in.
Trust in the whole team, and it works brilliantly. And I'm the rescue medic or rescue swimmer, as you can see with the gear I was wearing at the time, wetsuits and PPE for being in the water if it got to that point. But luckily with you, we didn't end up in the water.
We didn't. You're both very relaxed about this, but Max, you were sort of hanging right outside the helicopter operating the winch. It's not kind of just a basic sitting inside on a joystick sort of thing, is it? So in the exercise that I was involved in, just basically talk me through what happened through that process then. So
in that particular evolution, as I previously said, it was training, and so up the front in the right-hand seat was one of our pilots, Aaron Knight, who was doing a sign-off for wet winching, and in the left seat was James Taylor, who was doing the oversight and sign-off for him. I was in the back with Marcel. We also had Casey Drum, who was the other clinical care paramedic. And so the scenario was you're injured on the vessel, and in this particular vessel was Marae Coast Guard. And I just point out, like, we've worked with lots of other Coast Guards before, and always accommodating, always helpful, and we always get some good training benefit from them. So, part of the reason why we do as well as we do when we go out to rescue people from vessels is because of the help and assistance that those Coast Guard units give us, because, the majority, if not all of them, are volunteers. So it's really cool that they, some of them are taking days off work to come and help us. So that's pretty awesome, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So that was the scenario, that you were injured and we need you get you off, basically. And often is the case, you turn up, you see the vessel. We have some details of what your injuries may be. And this one was notional. And then we send a paramedic down to start with. And in this case, that's the job phone.
Oh.
So we send, Marcel goes down first and get him on board the vessel. And that's generally what you're trying to do. In the real case, what would happen is we get someone on and then we'll fly away. Because as you know, it's quite noisy. And then if it was Marcel that was first on, as he was in this case, he'll assess the scene and then he'll call us up and say, I need this gear or I need the other CCP to come with me, right? And in this instance, for training scenario, we got Casey to come down with some extra gear. You can take over from there if you like, Marcel.
Yeah, so that's right. In this instance, we couldn't just fly away because we were still attached to the boat via the high line, albeit just them holding it. But we know that too, and the pilots, and with Max just holding off, cruising along at that 7 knots nicely. And there's nothing too much to do, everyone's happy, the height's being held, the references are good. It's a bit noisy, obviously, and a bit of downwash perhaps, but it's often we work together, as Max just said. One will go down, make an assessment, might need some extra gear brought down, and then we'll come down with the extra gear. Depending on the complexity of the medical or injury issue, one will always come up with the patient. We try and make sure that one of us is back in the aircraft to help get the person in safely and efficiently as well. It's quite a common thing to both of us to go down and in this case ticked off a bunch of boxes in terms of that currency training and muscle memory and so next time when it's the real thing, we're all good to go. Not that you weren't the real thing.
Well, I wasn't really injured. I could have faked an injury a bit better, I think, had I known that. I must say, one thing I did think too was that I felt like it all happened very efficiently. I felt like I was in the harness, the nappy, and clicked in.
Super nappy.
And up really fast, that I didn't have any time to think about it, which I think was good for me. But I think if I had been injured, would have been great, because you don't get too much time to dwell on oh my goodness, I'm just about to be lifted from a boat to a helicopter.
Yeah.
which, you know, in some circumstances might be a little bit daunting.
Yeah, some people freak out a bit. But then again, people pay good money for that sort of thing at amusement parks too, you know, so.
True that.
It was really good, and you were a model patient, you know, and part of that is hopefully me reassuring you that you're safe, you're going to be safe, we're going to look after you, and we're going to get you safely from here to there without too much thought, like you say.
No, it absolutely was. I felt like I was in very safe hands. So specifically, what were you actually doing? You had lines coming down, things were being dropped, people were being hoisted back up. That was what I got from my end.
So that evolution is what we call a high line transfer technique evolution, which in a nutshell is it's a safer way to control people on the wire, in that we've lowered a rope down to the deck of the vessel. Then that rope, the winch wire is attached to the end of that. So you'll see in the video that as the wire comes down, the deck crew will pull the rope in, and then when you got hoisted off, you'll notice that they can control it as well. So it allows the aircraft to stand away from the the vessel a bit more, and it just makes the whole evolution a little bit safer.
Yes. Marcel, let's talk about that thing you put me in. I'm going to call it a harness. It was pretty impressive.
The adult rescue vest, or otherwise known as a super nappy.
For obvious reasons, it was very,
Yeah, it's a really handy piece of rescue equipment if the person's not too unwell, I don't know, something medically going on, but they're conscious and able to move around and support themselves in their own airway and breathing, then we can put this cape or rescue vest on and secure them inside, and then have a clip on which we then clip onto the winch wire when it comes down, with myself and any bags and things attached as required also to come up. Yeah.
I have to say, and I didn't expect this, I felt really safe and secure. Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm pleased.
And that was one of the things I was a little bit anxious about, but I felt very safe. Very safe. So your giant nappy did its job well. You mentioned that, you know, sometimes you're obviously going to be dealing with people who are suffering from injury and illness, which was different from the situation we had. That must make it a whole lot more difficult.
More challenging, I'd say. Then you have to look at the options of what you need. Can they go into a super nappy, or is it a bit more complex and do they need a stretcher? In which case Max would have lowered down the stretcher via the high line or directly onto the deck. And then we'd kit up. It'll take a bit longer. We'd let them know they'd go off somewhere and land if possible. If it's out at sea, then we have to work efficiently, get the person in the stretcher and the heli-tack bag, and then we can safely winch them up complete without any further decline in their medical condition or injury. Yeah.
This is a training exercise we did, obviously. What's sort of a real life scenario where you would use those skills?
Vessel like a yacht, perhaps, that's lost its rudderage or its control, where somebody's injured, they've fallen over and banged their head. They might have a head injury, they might be vomiting, and the seas might be reasonably rough, and so a high line is a reasonably ideal method, I think, to get onto the yacht safely, and then pull us down onto that and help them out, and then reverse the situation and get them off.
So one of the main reasons the high line comes about, and it's used throughout the world, like it's a standard technique, is for masted vessels. So that rotor isn't going to want to meet anything really. So with a tall masted vessel, and some vessels, you know, they can be well over 100 feet tall, so the mast, so it allows you to stand away from the vessel, and then the rope is used to guide the people onto and off the vessel, and you don't need to go over the top of the boat, so it makes it a whole lot safer.
There's so many elements. I should point out we're actually filming in an airfield, so if you can hear a bit of extra noise, we'll get a little bit of that coming through during the interview, I'm sure. A couple of things I noticed, and excuse my ignorance here, I was really surprised by how close the helicopter got to the boat. That really surprised me. I sort of imagined myself being winched up quite a way, but it was a very short winch up, wasn't it?
And controlled.
Yeah. So it's when it comes to winching, you want to be as low as you can, but you also need to weigh up a lot of variables. And so this particular aircraft, there's a lot of downwash. So we were lucky that day, so we had a reasonable bit of wind on the nose, which keeps the downwash behind us a bit. But probably just as importantly, the pilot who sits in this front right seat, they need to be able to see the boat at all times. We don't practice loss of reference winching to boats. We always want our pilot to be able to see the boat, because once the boat's gone, then if I'm saying I want you to move left, right, forward or back, that pilot's got nothing to reference it to. So we need to maintain that reference. So there's a sweet spot where we're high enough to keep the downwash away, but we're not so high that they can't still see the boat. And I think if you saw how much of the boat a pilot can see when they do that, you'd be, oh, I don't know if I'd volunteer for that again. They don't see much of it at all.
Thanks, Max. Yeah. I won't volunteer for that again. The other thing that I was surprised was the boat continued to move during the rescues. And I must admit, I was sitting there thinking, they're trying to drop things and pick things up off a moving target. Does that not make their job harder? But clearly it doesn't. Why is the boat still moving?
So with the boat, so we call it underway. And one of the advantages with that is it's a known variable. So the boat, we give them a course to head on and a speed to maintain. So it might be make your heading north and maintain speed 7 knots. So we know that they'll do that. And the crews that we train with, whether it be the Coast Guard or Maritime Police, they are very good at what they do. And we have faith that they'll maintain that heading and speed. And because we know that's happening, then it makes it a lot easier for the aircraft to just sit there. And you can sit there for as long as you have sea room or whatever. One of the problems we have, which is often the case when we go to an actual vessel rescue, is they're not underway, and they're what we call dead in the water, and all sorts of things can happen there because they're at the mercy of the wind, the tide, and our downwash if it's a thing, and it can get a little bit emotional at times.
I can imagine.
Especially with a smaller boat too, like a 5 metre dinghy or something, or a little runabout, and if they are anchored and they can't move, then it does get tricky, and it employs the whole crew to be able to have one shot pretty much at getting myself or my colleague onto the back of the boat, which we can achieve. But through all this training, that's what makes it so good, because it's a skill that's done infrequently, but we need to be right on the money when it happens. So we need to train and drill for all those scenarios.
So you've got that all covered. Marcel, you're on call right now, so we could lose you obviously at any minute if you get a call. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about us then.
Me and the helicopter.
And the helicopter. We'll lose our backdrop as well. That's not ideal. Your vest. So impressive. I mean, I felt like I was being rescued by MacGyver. Talk me through what you have with you when you are winched down, because you would need a lot of equipment, but obviously you're sort of carrying it all on your person almost, aren't you?
Yeah, so most of what I got on my person is our personal protection equipment. You know, we're fully coated up with shoes, fins if we end up in the water, wetsuits, high vis, orange, for these guys to be able to see, and if we ever got ditched in the water. We also have a personal locator beacon attached with us. Flotation, should something happen, we can pop the flotation vest so we can survive and float in the water. Helmets, communication, goggles, so everything's pretty much protected. And then anything extra we would take in, say, one of our bags we call a whiskey bag, and that's simply one of these packs. Standard in the aircraft we have an Alpha and Bravo pack with all our equipment, but the whiskey bag is more for these sorts of scenarios where we might have to take the cardiac monitor down, or some extra bits and pieces, and it's simply a bag called the whiskey bag. We know it's a spare bag only for those sorts of offshore situations or wet situations where we can take extra equipment down with us, and so that's clipped on to us as well. And then we're clipped onto the hook, and then we come down. And so, yeah, it's managing all of that, and then knowing once we're down there, that's part of it. But then you've got to treat the person and look after them and rescue them.
Yes, so sometimes you're actually providing treatment on a vessel before you're lifting them up into
Absolutely.
the helicopter.
Yeah, just getting onto the vessel is a small part of it, an important part of it, and to do it safely and efficiently. And then obviously our job is to look after people as paramedics, you know, to treat them, to look after, you know, to help fix their broken ankle or whatever medical condition they've got, and try and stop them from getting worse. And then if we think we need to take them into a hospital or somewhere, then winch them off as well. And so, but do it all safely with that treatment continuing on, and hopefully getting them to hospital in a better condition than when they first started. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's quite a lot to it, absolutely. But
yeah, in trying conditions with people who are not in their best emotional states because they've suffered some injury or what have you.
And we've got to balance all that up too. You know, sometimes it's not safe for whatever reason, physically, emotionally, mentally, whatever. Maybe the seas suddenly get worse and it's just not safe to winch them off. Then we have to come up with a plan B, you know, and maybe Coast Guard or Police Maritime or somebody will come and help us, and we may need to do the transfer to a safer spot by boat initially and then winch them off or land somewhere and transfer them off, for example.
Right, so you're all working together. What was the vial you had in your vest? You're like a vial, was it like
the Psyllium stick.
Oh yes, probably the Psyllium stick, the light, especially good for night. We can just crack it, you know, like the Christmas and the park lights. A glow stick, yeah.
Probably more expensive than the ones you buy from the dollar shops, I think.
No.
Sometimes the simplest things work the best.
No, I just noticed it and I was looking at it on the day thinking, what is that? What is that little vial there? It's not your wheatgrass shot or anything like that.
And it's so handy because I did a night winch recently, and when the crewman, the ACO sends the hook down with the a little weighted bag, the same weighted bag we practiced with on the boat that day, it had the little Xylem stick or the glow stick snap, and I could see it, and it was so clear. It gave me reference to that because, you know, got the bright lights above you and everything else, but that stick was just wonderful. So it really helps.
Brilliant. I want to ask about your helmets too, because everyone seems to be slightly different. Is that right?
So we have flight helmets for inside the aircraft, which we use routinely for 90% of the work, and then for the wets and decks and the water work, the high lines and so forth, we, as part of our rescue swimmer kit, we have that sort of military grade looking helmet, which is waterproof. It's got the comms. It protects our head, protects our ears from the noise, but also enables communication. And even a foot or two under the water while you're trying to rescue somebody from the surf or from an upturned boat, for example, with a strop, you can still hear what's going on the whole time. And there's a lot going on in a situation like that. So the helmets are absolutely gold. They're for protection, safety, communication.
They were impressive.
Yeah.
Was that training, was it a success the other day, Max?
Well, you came back in one piece, Pippa, so I always say if we get back and no one's hurt and everybody's still on board, then it must have been a good day, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So no, it was, and we both the two pilots on those two sorties passed their test, for want of a better word. So no, it was really good, and we got some great currency out of it. And it's always good to get someone like yourself that has no idea of how this works, because generally when we train, we will use other CCPs for survivors, or we've got a dummy that sort of floats around, and they're known identities. Yeah. No, it wasn't you, Pippa. And the good thing about having someone like yourself is there's a bit of unpredictability there. So it means these guys and girls, when they're on the deck, that they do have to do it properly, right? Because they need to make sure that, whereas if they've got another one of their cohorts with them, then they know exactly what's going to happen.
Even
so
if
it's
they're
quite
trying
good.
not to. Well, I think when I came up, what was I doing wrong with my head? I wasn't ducking or something?
Oh, no, I think I'm quite vertically challenged and you aren't. So when we come up past the step, we've got to get it high enough so Marcel can get his feet on the step. And because you sit a little bit higher than others, you found yourself up by the top of the door. So you didn't do anything wrong, Pippa.
So I've just done a favour for all tall people who need to be rescued in the future. No, but that was great. Again, I was feeling like I was being guided and I was inside the helicopter pretty quickly. So you have 2 paramedics on board. Why 2?
So it's really as a backup. I've been on a few jobs where there's been multiple people in the water, 4 or 5, and one person on the wire. You know, they rescue 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, and then it's physically challenging and quite exhausting. So we can tap out. But even if we don't tap out, as they come to the door, the rescue is done, but then they need to be pulled inside and positioned in a place where I can start looking after, if I'm the person inside, the treatment of them. You know, putting on some monitoring, getting a blanket on, reassuring them, getting them, and then the other guys going back down again. So it's really around a safety and efficiency sort of thing, especially when you're far offshore, and if something happened to yourself, you know, going down, God forbid, you know, you've got a second person there that can look after,
Absolutely.
you know, you and the others as well.
Yes. Well, Max and Marcel, thank you very much for today, and a big thank you for such an easy rescue for me the other day. Great talking to you both. It was really, really interesting. Look forward to seeing you all next time for Chopper Chat, and a big shout out to Maraetai Coast Guard for all of their wonderful assistance on the day. They were brilliant as well.